Nebraska coaches and players on the hot seat Tuesday in Lincoln. Is this what Coach Matt Rhule wanted?
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase.
All right, welcome. It is Wednesday here on the Locked On Nebraska podcast. I'm Connor Hepper from 1620 The Zone in Omaha. Mitch Sherman from The Athletic here as well. John Butler and Dana Holgorsen, they got to get up yesterday and they had to face the music a little bit. Their head coach on Monday, their boss on Monday, talked about a lot of their shortcomings from the game there and other people's shortcomings from the game on Friday against Minnesota. So Tuesday was the coordinator's day to step up in front of everybody. And it was a mixed bag of sort of the things that we had heard from Rhule on Monday. A lot of like, yeah, we agree. And then with some more added information as well that maybe didn't necessarily, it didn't make that game look any better than it was on Friday.
They're not doing a good job this week of making it seem like that was just a one-off and that could never happen again. I wouldn't say they're doing a bad job of that, but they're laying it out there like it is. It was a mess. It was a disaster. All kinds of stuff went wrong. They didn't expect to see it happen. Both coordinators mentioned, Holgorsen specifically mentioned that he watched Matt Rhule's press conference on Monday, and Butler a couple of times during his answers said, no, I can't argue. I agree with Coach Rhule, or I can't argue with Coach Rhule in what he said there. So they just were peppered with questions, as were the Nebraska players on Tuesday, Dylan Raiola. And we'll talk about who was there, which I think is significant. But they were all peppered with questions about Matt Rhule's comments. It was like from one to the next. Coach said that the coaches and players didn't take Minnesota seriously. What do you say about that? Coach said that the defensive game plan was vanilla. What do you say about that? Coach was unhappy with the commitment to the run game. What's your response to that? And then a lot of, what do you think of Rhule's comments that the players were entitled as they went out there to play at Minnesota? That's a big word, and it's kind of a word that has a lot of suggestive qualities to it. So they all got to hear about it. This wasn't just like a happy, let's get the 5 minutes with the media done and then move on with the week. They had to answer in the hot seat, as we said.
I thought Butler's, the strange admission of so going off of what Rhule said Monday about the vanilla defense, and then which was followed on Tuesday by the admission by John Butler that they sort of after the long Darius Taylor run, the 71-yard Darius Taylor run, that they sort of the approach changed and it got a little bit more conservative, and Butler had this weird sort of combination of being upset at himself about it, but also like sort of defending it in a way as well. Odd. It was sort of the admissions that are coming from this game from the coaches and the players alike are
striking.
Yeah, that's a good word for it. They're odd at the very least.
Maybe this is like neither here nor there as it relates to the season this year, although I think it matters. The evolution of John Butler and like what he is in public, and I don't think he's all that much different behind closed doors, so that is probably why it doesn't matter for the football season. But as far as us getting to know him, fans getting to know him, it just continues to amaze me that it's happened so fast, because 12 months ago or 16 months ago when John Butler showed up in Lincoln, you could hardly get a peep out of him about anything that was going on in the inner workings of Nebraska football. And here he is on Tuesday saying that he changed his mindset about the way that he called the game because of one run bust. And it wasn't just one run bust. I'm sure this was like this was a traumatic moment for Butler. Like he's having flashbacks to the Michigan game.
Correct.
When the Wolverines scored 3 touchdowns on long runs, and he's thinking, oh no, it's the beginning of the second quarter, and there goes Darius Taylor, who's run for like 40 yards in the last 2 games, busting off a 71-yarder. Like, I have to change the way that I call defense so that we don't give up 3 touchdowns on the ground again, in the way that we did in our only loss this season. So you can understand like his hesitance in the moment to stay aggressive, but like he was really hard on himself. He said this: "You're not a sheep, but you have sheep moments." So he's calling himself a sheep, even though he also said that he's a fighter and he doesn't back down from fights. And there was a lot of fight analogies from Butler and others on Tuesday.
Yeah, you got to. I mean, I get it. You do have to have like the competitive, stamina to stick with the plan. But it just felt like Nebraska got for Butler. The moment in that game was the Taylor run. And he was just shell shocked by it. He's like, okay, I'm not going to allow the Michigan game to happen again. So let's just change things up completely. And that didn't serve Nebraska particularly well, because as you and I and anybody listening to this podcast can remember, Drake Lindsey was hitting, short crossers all day long. And Nebraska was just sitting behind them until later in the game when they finally threw a couple balls vertically down the field and they got what they wanted. So it was a messy deal on both sides of the ball.
You could maybe say that helped keep them in the game. I don't know that Taylor was going to break a bunch more long runs. This isn't the Michigan run game. They didn't have Justice Haynes and Bryce Underwood out there, but it kept him in the game. Like it was 14-6 after 3 quarters, and Nebraska, was 1 drop pass away from having a 2-point conversion to tie it. But this isn't what John Butler came to Nebraska to do. This isn't what he envisioned for himself. It went off the rails for him, no matter how you slice it on Friday.
Yeah, it goes away from complimentary football, and obviously the offense wasn't holding up their end of the bargain either. But what Nebraska needed in that game was to not allow a 14-play, 98-yard touchdown drive. They needed to get a turnover. They needed to create.
That's a great point.
Some sparks on defense. So that drive killed them, right? And
that's a great point. Yeah, you wonder, and
they're sitting back.
Yeah, was the defensive passiveness related to Minnesota's 98-yard drive? And definitely. I hadn't really thought like of what the ramifications were of Butler's comments yesterday about taking the aggressiveness away. And it would stand to reason that it was 100%. It turned into the 14-play, 98-yard drive. Like that's a drive where if you're being aggressive, maybe Minnesota still scores, but it's on a longer play and it takes less time off the clock and it doesn't shorten the game in the way that it does, or you get a stop and a turnover or some kind of a game-changing play.
I believe this is right, Mitch. I don't believe that they even saw a third down on that drive. Minnesota's offense. It was just
not until they got toward the red zone. Yeah. Because the pass or the defensive holding call on Donovan Jones was during that drive, and that was a 4th down play. And then that was a backbreaker. And then right after that, Minnesota went over the top of the Nebraska defense, and Lindsey made his best throw of the night for the touchdown. 20-yarder. So not enough resistance. Interesting stuff from Butler. And Holgorsen, let's talk about him. He kind of came out firing on the suggestion that he just called a bunch of pass plays to start the game. And there was a direct question about, why did you pass the ball on 3 plays to start the game when if you had listened to Rule, you would know that like this was going to be a physical game and needed to establish physicality. And Dana said, well, 2 of those were run plays. They were actually RPOs, so run pass options. And Dylan chose to throw on one of those plays because I think he said he had like looked like he had an open receiver, but Minnesota made a play, and then specifically called out Isaiah Hunter on the other RPO in saying that Hunter didn't get the check, or Hunter didn't recognize that it was an RPO, and he didn't run a route. So there was no one running a route. I guess this was a one route play, and
which is
Dylan
good.
got sacked. Dillon got sacked. And even with no one running a route, Nebraska had surmised in watching the video that it would have been a touchdown if if Hunter had run the route. I didn't quite love that whole explanation about the first drive. If you want to run plays, then call run plays.
Yeah, I agree, and you have to set a tone early in the game. It's good to have that added context of like they didn't just come out and decide that they were going to start throwing it. They were RPO plays, and it looked like he made on the first play he threw it. It was complete to Hunter, I think, and it was a 4 or 5 yard play, so he made the right read on that and all that stuff. But yeah, the whole touchdown, like, it would have been a touchdoan. I that always sort of grinds my gears a little bit when I hear that stuff. There's
a lot of that.
Yeah,
there's a lot of that. Yeah, that if there was a bust on that punt return, but if we didn't have that, it would have been a touchdown. Okay.
Yeah. I do think people need to sort of realize like these. So you'll hear this and you're like, well, these guys weren't in the right position and they were missing communications and they were missing assignments and all that stuff. And like this happens like all the time during a football game. It's kind of rare where everybody's just working in concert together and everything works as planned. But at the same time, the more it happens, and if it's happening every play, and if it's a different thing every play, that's when you get games like this that just look broken from the very start. And that's what Nebraska got on Friday night. So there's one of two ways to go. It's like, all right, do we know the issues? Have we addressed the issues? What's going to happen here? Or, is Nebraska going to allow themselves to think that they are this kind of team going forward? It'll be it's a fascinating week already. It's certainly a fascinating opponent to get all this on Saturday. But Nebraska's got to answer the bell for sure.
All right, let's come back and talk about what the players had to say on Tuesday. We heard from Archie Wilson, maybe somewhat surprisingly.
But first, a word from our friends from Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. You can check out the Mazda lineup of vehicles for a fit that'll work for you. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride. It has more IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than any other company. That's as of August 2025. From footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings this same intention to how they craft every model. Feel Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but. With smooth handling and intuitive controls, it's easy to enjoy your time behind the wheel of a Mazda. And with all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you will drive with confidence through almost any season. Like the athletes you watch, Mazda sweats every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved.
And a word from Peloton. I might sneak in a Peloton ride right after we get done with this podcast here. Have reason to need to do that. I'll tell you about that later in the show. So Peloton, we're not talking about the bike here. Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with a brand new Peloton cross-training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. It is Peloton's most advanced piece of equipment yet, designed to give you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running, lifting, or cross-training with your favorite instructors. The training is reimagined. Peloton is built for breakthroughs with tools that help you plan, stay motivated, and reach peak performance. I love how the Peloton IQ system offers real-time strength coach training. It actually tracks your reps, suggests the right weights for you to use, corrects your form, and makes every movement safer and smarter. The swivel screen on that piece of equipment is a game changer. You can go from running on the Tread Plus to strength training without missing a beat. And they've got personalized class recommendations to keep you engaged. So let yourself run, lift, flex, and push forward. Explore the new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus today at onepeloton.com. All right, we're back. Mitch Sherman, Connor Happer with you on this Wednesday episode of the Locked On Nebraska podcast, making our way through Northwestern week. We are locked in for a guest on Thursday's show. So looking forward to that. I think some excellent insight for all of you listeners and viewers out there. We should have a guest with us for maybe 2 segments of the show, and then we're going to get to our picks for the weekend, also including the Nebraska Northwestern game. And Friday will be the mailbag show. So you got questions that have come up here in this interesting last 5 or 6 days of Nebraska football, send them to us at lockedonneb@gmail.com. We will answer them on the show Friday. All right, so the players who made their way to the podium on Tuesday for Nebraska, you had Henry Lutovsky, captain, offensive lineman, like showing accountability there. O-line gave up 9 sacks. I think in a lot of times in Nebraska football history, after a week like that, well, there maybe has never been a week like that, but a bad week for the O-line, you would not have an offensive lineman coming up and answering questions. So credit to Henry. He doesn't love to do that, I don't think, but he's been a steady voice for the Nebraska offensive line going all the way back to Big Ten Media Days, and did a nice job of speaking for them on Tuesday. Marcus Watson-Trent, a linebacker, a veteran. Luke Lindenmeyer, tight end, a veteran. You had Andrew Marshall, who's one of the more talkative, media-friendly newcomers on the team this year, but also a veteran in the defensive backfield. Of course, Dylan Raiola, always batting last in the media sessions. There he was to have the final word. And Archie Wilson, we heard from Archie. He led off things. Freshman, punter. I guess there was nothing that anyone could really ask Archie about. You're not going to ask Archie about accountability and entitlement, Wilson. Probably.
Archie Wilson.
Archie Wilson. No.
Yes, that was Archie.
You asked him about punting well, which he did on Friday night. There was a couple moments where I was like, oh, wow, Archie's kind of the star of the game. He was running around, jumping around, and fist bumping. Like he was probably the bright, shining star for Nebraska on Friday night.
He talked about the wind from the Michigan State game and how hard that was to kick into that wind. So Luke Lindenmeyer, we'll start here. He said he noticed last week that Nebraska lost sight of, quote, who it was and what it was built on. So he said that he wished you would have said something during the week.
Yeah, I wish. That's interesting. I mean, and insightful, because according to basically everybody else, nobody saw this coming. And Luke Lindenmeyer was like, yeah, I don't know. I maybe saw that throughout the week, which is sort of fascinating to me. It's crazy, and it definitely doesn't reflect well that everyone's takeaway from this was like, yeah, we weren't ourselves, or some version of like we didn't take them seriously, even though nobody has said exactly that. But it's like, no, we didn't get up for our opponents enough. I
think Lutovsky came the closest to saying that.
Yeah.
He said he was so sure that Nebraska was the better team all through last week. He said, I still believe that. And then he said he thought that the game was in hand, or at least it was manageable, and that Minnesota would quit in the fourth quarter. Why would you think that? Like, have you he's played against Minnesota before. He's been in the program for 4 or 5 years. So one thing that Minnesota does not do against Nebraska is quit in the fourth quarter.
Yeah,
the game in 2023, they won the game in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, it's so weird. It's so weird that was the thought that was. It's a team that's beat you 5 times in a row. You're going to play there in a hostile environment Friday night. They love beating you. Like I said many times in this show already this week, Minnesota clearly really, really enjoys beating Nebraska, and a lot of people have been around for some of those games as well. And then there's Dylan, who's talking about having a meeting with player only meeting basically on Sunday, like getting all of the hard truths out and stuff like that. Like, whoa, I hope that this wasn't as ground shaking of a situation, or maybe this is what exactly what they needed. I don't know. It depends on, we'll get the result of what this week has been on Saturday, but it clearly has shaken everybody a little bit to their core, which, depending on your view and depending on what happens on Saturday, it's either really a good thing that this is all taking place right now, or it's something that sort of goes throughout the rest of the year.
I wrote about this. The story's out today on The Athletic, and just kind of trying to collect the thoughts of all that we've heard from Rule and the players over the last 2 days, and assess what this is. Like, what is this moment for Nebraska in this season? And, the thing that they didn't talk about and really weren't asked about, I mean, Rule was asked indirectly about it on Monday, is if you go back to, you want to talk about last week, like last week was all about this Penn State talk.
Yep.
And that was the predominant conversation piece about Nebraska football locally and, of course, nationally. I mean, there was no reason nationally to be talking about anything other than that when it came to Nebraska, but it was there. It was in the air. It was a cloud over the program. It was new for Nebraska. I think if you've been in a situation as a program, like you're a G5 program and you have a coach who's coveted, like maybe you're used to it because you've gone through this every year, or like every week something new comes up. This was very new for Nebraska. Every player on that roster, it was new for in their time at Nebraska. And I think one thing we can deduce from all that we heard from the players and coaches is that there was a general lack of focus around Nebraska last week. And some of it, I believe, we don't know this because they're not admitting it, but some of it, I believe, had to do with the Penn State talk, which isn't going away. Like, yeah.
I agree. And you would never be able to, like, there's no pie chart on what the percentage of distraction was or what you were distracted by throughout the week, but it all goes into the distraction, like cauldron that you just sort of mix around a little bit. And I think there's that. I think there's the entitlement piece that we talked about earlier in the week with the, you get a little number by your name and all of a sudden you think you're really cool. There's a little bit of that stuff going on. It all mixes into this big, bull and the exact, not the exact worst opponent to be playing that week, but it's pretty high up there in the list as they don't seem or look all that threatening from the outside, but gosh, dude, number one, they love beating you. Number two, they have this very specific style of football that completely contrasts against what you do or and how, this team is sort of built this year. So you could make the argument that it was wrong place, wrong time. You could. And I think part of it has been this week.
I do think it was just about the worst team they could play, because if it's Iowa, they would have your attention. If it's Oregon or USC, of course, you would be all into the brand that you were playing, which is something Nebraska's trying to avoid, by the way. If it was Akron, it wouldn't have mattered. So Minnesota is about the worst team that Nebraska could have played in that situation last week. I imagined Rule. He says that he used to watch all of the interviews with his players and coaches, but he said at one point this year that he had stopped doing that because he just doesn't have time. And, he also, there's more of a trust factor in him knowing what they're going to say when they go speak to the public here in year 3. So I imagine that he probably took more notice yesterday because he set them up to be in a hard spot with his comments. And that may have been intentional on his comments on Monday. So I think he may have been kind of nodding his head and saying, all right, guys, this is good that you all had to squirm a little bit in the chair on Tuesday, because like uncomfortable situations can sometimes lead to positive outcomes.
Yeah, I really do believe that Nebraska will respond well this week on the football field. I know the quotes this week have been sort of like, whoa, eye-opening, but I really do think history suggests that Nebraska will play well on Saturday. They've been in this spot before, and I think they'll emotionally sort of dig themselves out of a hole, and then they'll give themselves a shot to have a big game against USC the next week.
Okay. Should we come back and talk about Troy Dannen? He was on the radio on Tuesday night. Let's do that. A message now from Game Time, because college football is in mid-season, almost late season form, and we could not be more excited. They've got tailgates, the rivalries, those rivalries that have not been played, then they are coming up in the month of November. There's energy in the stands, just nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets to some of these games can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. There are endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why I love to use Game Time. It's the app that gives the advantage back to college football fans. The easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees, What you see on Game Time on the app is what you pay. It makes it simple to get a view of your seats right there on the app. You can take advantage of zone deals. I love trying that out with zone deals. You pick the section, Game Time will give you the seats, and then you save money. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today.
All right, welcome back. Don't forget, we'll still have a mailbag episode on Friday this week, so get those questions in, lockedonneb@gmail.com, or any other way you would like to get in touch with us this week. And like Mitch said, we'll have a special guest tomorrow for a portion of the
vibrant mailbag on Friday, I would imagine.
I think so too. It's been an interesting week, that's for sure. Troy Dannen went on the radio last night on the Husker Radio Network. And his job is to look at things from a big picture perspective. Haven't heard much from Dannen lately. Probably predictably so. I
just don't think he's an AD that's going to talk a lot during the season. But yeah, publicly he still talks. He talks to the people who work around him in his office. I'm sure he talks to his wife.
And you're right. I'm sure he does. And but he did go on make his monthly appearance on the radio last night, and he talked about where Nebraska's at from, if his monthly appearance was scheduled for last week, it's a much different interview.
Yeah.
Than it is this week.
Would it have been more uncomfortable last week? I don't know.
Possibly. But this week he's tasked with dealing with this pendulum that wildly swings in any college football fan base, which is, we love our coach and we would like to make him we want him to be here for 100 more years and make him the highest paid coach of all time, to actually he should go and he should take everyone with him the next week. And that's what he was dealing with.
Yeah. His eyes are open, obviously, as a Power 4 AD, to the way that things work in this sport. And he knows as well as anyone that this Penn State stuff with Rule is legitimate, that there is very, very, very likely will be interest from his alma mater. Not saying that interest to make him the number one candidate, but they're going to kick the tires if they're not already in the process of doing that. So he's, I think you should have some faith, Nebraska fans, in knowing that you have an athletic director who is experienced and is not going to be caught off guard by anything that happens here. Now, I mean, if Rule tells Dannen, hey, I'm staying, it's a done deal, forget about it, you don't need to worry about anything, and then Dannen just kind of puts that stuff back into his desk drawer, and then a week later Rule's waving goodbye and packing up the car, then sure, Dannen might be surprised. But even in that scenario, he's been around this game for too long to be caught off guard. Nebraska has a pro in the AD chair, and he's gonna make it okay for Nebraska. It would be very hard to transition in December, considering all the stuff that you're trying to do as a program right now. But you have the right guy and Nebraska's been in a spot before, quite a few spots, I'd say, where it has not had the right person in the AD seat to make that to navigate this situation, no matter what happens over the next 2 months. And it does have the right person right now.
So here's why you can't come to too many snap judgments one way or the other, whether it involves your coach potentially being courted by another school or wins and losses week to week. He says this last night: if you don't do it right, if you don't do the steps right, that 15-year rebuild, that 15 years will be 20 for some of our fans, and it'll be some other AD and some other coach here trying to do it and trying to sell you. But I think we have a really good plan. I think we're in a really good place, and I wish it was as easy as flipping a switch.
Ouch. Yeah, I mean, that's a hard reality, and it's true. Nebraska fans have been waiting 15 years, longer, honestly. It's already at 20. I mean, 20 years ago was 2005, and Nebraska had already been through a painful coaching search at that point with the firing of Frank Solich. So the 20-year anniversary of that was a year ago. And here they are, still grappling for their identity and national relevance and all of that.
The
So
Bo era erasure is out and well.
Yeah. So if it doesn't work out, what he's saying is he's going to get fired, and Rule's going to get fired or leave, and you're going to be right back at the spot you were in 2022 or 2017.
The point is,
which is tough.
You're best off just seeing one thing through. And he's absolutely right about that. You just have to. And everyone knows, like, we've been through this enough times now I can't believe we have to like refresh this message all the time, but like, you know, when it's really not working. It's not the first time you lose, no show for a game on a Friday night in Minnesota. That's not when the right time is. You just, it comes to this natural sort of conclusion, when you know, and it's at that point.
Very true.
It's at that point where you start to think about making changes or whatever it might be. And we're obviously not even remotely close to that.
How about the revelation from Troy Dannen that Nebraska has had 100,000 ticket requests? I thought that was a typo for the Savannah Bananas game in June at Memorial Stadium.
Crazy. That's what 1/18 of the state.
Well, I mean, he said that the requests are coming from all over the Midwest.
Oh, I bet.
Because the Bananas don't play everywhere. They're playing in Iowa City next summer too. But wow, 100,000. Okay.
They're doing Kansas City too again next summer.
Okay.
They're doing conference meeting, but it's not.
I guess they're going to sell it out. That answers the question. He had one of his associates, Dannen, did on the show last night, talking about how they will change the turf at Memorial Stadium into a baseball field and then change it back very quickly after the Bananas play for Nebraska's camp sessions. So found that very interesting. That might be a project to go behind the scenes with Nebraska's event and turf management team next summer. Although it'll be right around the College World Series, so
probably not.
My head's going to be spinning. All right, so on Tuesday night, I suffered a little injury, so you can't really see it. It's pretty. I can't wear my ring here because my finger's a little swollen. So let me tell you about this.
Okay.
And it's not relevant to anything.
Perfect.
So yesterday morning we were leaving for school with Zach, and he busted some donut holes out of the refrigerator that had appeared, I guess, while I was at Minnesota last week. I didn't know they were there, and he was eating a couple of them, and he said, don't eat the chocolate ones. There's only 2 left. I'm going to have those. I said, hey, no problem. I'm not eating those donut holes. I'm not eating donut holes today. Like, forget that. So he ate the 2 chocolate ones and then threw away in the trash the remaining donut holes. They were in a plastic container. It was like a couple of powdered sugar and then some of those glazed ones that don't really have glaze on them. By the way, the Walmart donut holes, like, I'm not going to be out here saying that like Walmart has a lot of great food to just walk out of there with, but they can do donut holes like nobody else. I don't know. Agreed. I don't know why that is, but it's better than like bakeries and grocery stores, and like Gophers and Walmart donut holes. So it's like 3 or 4 in the afternoon, and I'm at home, and I open up the trash can to throw some stuff away, and I see those donut holes in there, and they're in that plastic container. I want to stress that they're in the plastic container. So did I eat donut holes out of the trash? You bet I did. I ate them right out of the plastic container in the trash, which meant that about 90 minutes later, when it came time for dinner, that I was not hungry. So instead of having like a full dinner, I think Zach and my wife Shannon were having tacos or something. I made some oatmeal, and it's strange. I haven't had oatmeal in a while. It was looking at me in the pantry. So I put it into the microwave, and I opened up the microwave after 2.5 minutes, and it was all bubbled over. Like 10% of it was like out of the bowl, and it had made a huge mess, well, a small mess in the microwave. So I grabbed the bowl to go walk over to the counter and see what I could do with this situation. And it got me like all over my hand, the oatmeal, like it really hurt. And I fumbled the bowl. It was on my pants. It was on the floor in the kitchen. It was on the counter.
Yeah.
And I'm like running to the sink to run cold water under my hand. So that's where I'm at. That's where I was at. It was a fine moment between eating out of the trash and burning my hand. Quite an afternoon My wife, she has no idea about the donut holes and how I ate them out of the trash. So somebody, she won't listen to this, but somebody, if you know her, I would say, tell her, I want to see if it gets back to me.
Okay, good. I like that.
Not you.
All right. So this is because I burn my hand like damn near every day on the something that like falls out of a thing that I'm cooking, and I try to like fetch it out of the little grates of the stove or whatever. And I consider these endeavors, like if it's a meat or something like that, I consider these endeavors to be the price that you pay. You get a little burn on the knuckle or something like that. You're like, but at least I got that little piece of steak.
But what you're going to say is like, there's nothing masculine or cool about burning yourself on a bowl of oatmeal. No, it was gross. Like, what was I even eating that for dinner? That's
on a George Foreman grill trying to make bacon in the morning because you like the smell of bacon. And you burn your hand on a boiling over bowl of oatmeal. That's a really tough way to go.
It is. It's a bad look. It's a bad look for me. I'll try to do better today.
Excellent. What a great story. Please share your most recent way you burn your hand with us here on the Locked On Nebraska podcast. Thanks for listening today. For your second listen, check out Locked On Big Ten with Craig. And of course, you can find that podcast the same place you get this podcast, on YouTube or wherever you get them. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.